Welcome to the URISA webinar of the 2020 Census Content Tour of the ArcGIS Living Atlas. And hopefully you're all familiar with URISA. We take great pride in our sort of focus on excellence in GIS and the whole geospatial realm. I wouldn't just say GIS, I think it's more than that. I'm Glenn O'Grady, your host. I've been a URISA member since '79. I'm a past president, and I am the current chair of the URISA Policy Advisory Committee. So welcome to you all. Hopefully you're all on Connect if you're a member, and if you're not a member, why aren't you a member? So Connect is our online community, and it's hopefully will grow and grow to be a very valuable asset to all members. If you haven't heard about our very popular GIS Leadership Academy, well, these dates are old, aren't they, Wendy? These are or the one coming up in Denver. If you haven't signed up, it's a great. We've had great reviews of it. And we do our webinars usually monthly on different topics like this one. And we just finished our GIS Pro for this year in Columbus, and our next year's conference will be in Portland, Maine. So hope to see everybody there. And with that, I will introduce our speakers. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. So Diana Lavery is a senior GIS engineer at Esri. She's got 15 years experience in demography, sociology, economics, policy analysis, and GIS. She's got degrees in quantitative economics and applied demography, and is a senior GIS engineer on ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World's Policy Maps team. Stephen Aviles is also on that team. He's a GIS engineer, and he's interested in transportation, housing, and demography. Although a native Minnesotan, he's currently living in sunny Pasadena. And with that, I will turn it over to Diana, if she'll be the lead speaker. So go ahead. And
Thank you. Yes.
Before you do, any questions? When do you want to take questions? At the end?
Yeah, that sounds
Okay.
great. And,
Okay.
you know, we'll see them come in the chat too. And either Stephen or I might be able to respond to them when we're trading off, but
and I'll try to keep
at the end.
and I'll try to keep track of it as well. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining. We are going to take you on a content tour of all the wonderful content in Living Atlas related to census. So let me give you a brief outline as to what we're going to go over. Very briefly, just what is Living Atlas? For not everyone might know what that is. And then we have something called DHC, which is demographic and housing characteristics. I'll get more into that. It's one of the really rich data sets from the decennial census. We'll also talk about all the additional decennial census content. And then finally, content from Census Bureau data products that are not decennial. So they do a lot more than just the count every 10 years. They have a lot of big survey programs, and we have a few of those available for you in Living Atlas. We'll close with some resources and then Q&A with Glenn. Thank you. So first of all, just a very brief overview about what is ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World. It's essentially the content that comes with your ArcGIS software. So it is a whole big collection of data layers, certainly, but also web maps and apps, tools, imagery, files, all kinds of content types, web scenes, and more that are available to you. So there are so many ways where you can access Living Atlas content from within ArcGIS. These are just two ways here with the Living Atlas tab in My Content in ArcGIS Online. And then in Map Viewer, adding a layer you can add from Living Atlas. And in fact, Stephen will show you that way in particular. But yeah, it's essentially the content. Basically, before Web GIS, Organization A had to essentially build their own GIS before they could get started. And Organization B had to build their own as well. And oftentimes, everyone's building census data, everyone's building some, maybe CDC data for those in the health world, these really foundational data sets. We're like, why don't we tap into the GIS, the web GIS, and all Living Atlas content has this blue globe stamp that says it's been reviewed, it's been curated. This is essentially approved for use, or recommended for use, I should say. So that's just a brief overview about what we're talking about here with ArcGIS Living Atlas. As I mentioned, the demographic and housing characteristics file from the decennial census is now available in Living Atlas. It came out earlier this year around May, late May. And so here we are a few months later. They put out, umpteen hundred tables. We grouped those into the categories that you'll see here. And we knew for sure that people wanted block data because this is the chance to get that block data very high level, just a few fields, total population, total housing units, things like that, very high level. We have a block characteristics layer for you for the whole US. And then we went to some of the more interesting tables and really grouped them by category. So population, age, all kinds of counts there. And then we also added some calculated fields available for you with full documentation on the formulas, which Stephen will go over in a minute. But yeah, we added things like pop density and sex ratios. For housing, similarly, we just did a very simple calculation for available housing. So census gives you vacant housing. That's not always what's available for rent or for sale. So we took out some of the seasonal, second home kind of things that are not part of the available housing inventory that real estate people care about. So just adding a few calc fields that are very simple sums and percentages. However, we did go a little bit deeper with some of them. For example, with race and ethnicity, we did quite a bit of a lit review here to see what measures people are using for things like residential segregation, Census's diversity index, which looks at whether two people chosen at random from a particular area would be of a different race and ethnicity, and something called diffusion score. I mean, we really wanted to get as many measures as are currently being used out there, calculated and available in the layers. And then our households layer, we have attributes beyond the family versus non-family binary. So Census actually does provide counts for things like cohabiting partner households and things like that. Finally, household population versus group quarters population. So I think it's about 97% or 98% of people live in households. And so you can think of, okay, what types of households? Are these multi-generational households? one-person households, which is a growing type with a lot of widows staying in their home these days because they're very healthy in old age. So that is the type of stuff you'll find in that household population layer. And then group quarters is that other 2.5%. These are people who live in group-based settings. So you can think of military barracks, university student housing, a lot of correctional facilities and various types of correctional facilities. And a growing one these days is also nursing homes and homeless shelters, things like that. So that's what we mean by group quarters population. And so all these attributes, we really tried to keep the census table and field IDs so that anyone who wants to can go back to census and verify and see exactly where we're pulling these things from. You might be wondering, okay, that's the attributes, but I'm really curious what geography levels are available. So we definitely have the nested ones, the nation, state, county, tract, block group, the nesting doll type thing. But we knew that people want it by various metro levels, various types of place levels, cities, villages, townships, things like that, legislative, also school districts, and a new one for us this time around was the tribal areas as well. So all the attributes you just heard about are available at these levels of geography in Living Atlas when they're available from Census. So with that, I'll turn things over to Stephen to show you a demo of these layers.
Thanks, Diana. Let me share my screen. There you go. All right. As Diana had mentioned, I'll be going over a quick demo on how to use Living Atlas content in your work. I'll be using ArcGIS Online's map viewer for this demo, but you can also use Living Atlas content in ArcGIS Pro as well with similar workflows. I'll switch over to my web browser. So if you're going to ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World, this is the homepage that you'll land on. If you want to find content, whether it's layers, maps, web applications, etc., you can do so in this search bar, but I find it's a lot easier to go through the browse section within ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World. Here you can search by different subtopics or categories. So if I wanted trending topics or if I wanted just base maps, I could filter by those. If you want demographic data, you go to people. If you want infrastructure, so transportation related things, utilities, etc., you could go to infrastructure and filter by there. If I wanted just feature layers, for example, if I wanted to build my own map and work with feature layers, I can go down to the all content types and then go down to the layers just to get just layers, for example. Now for the 2020 decennial census, for the demographic and housing characteristics, if I want to find those in Living Atlas, I can just type 2020 census, and I should see, if I type it right, it should see a number of layers pop up. So I see things that are recommending the US 2020 census population characteristics, housing characteristics for specifically for the place geographies, etc. There's block populations. I'm just going to use, I'll type in US just to make it a little bit more specific. And I'll just hit the magnifying glass to see what kind of layers we have. So our team manages and has created all of these different layers related to demographic and housing characteristics. For instance, if I wanted to work with specifically housing characteristics, I could click this US 2020 census housing characteristics. If I wanted to look at just places, for example, I could go to this one that has place geographies, but we also have tribal, the standard census tract, county, etc., as well as school districts and legislative, as well as a few other geography types. But I'm going to go to this place geography. For this demo, let's say I'm interested in looking at my city of interest, where I'm from. I can use this layer here. Right now, I'm looking at the item description page. This just gives kind of overview descriptions of all the different types of information for this specific layer. In the summary, we can see kind of what is currently being mapped when we open up the map. So it's going to be housing by tenure, owner, or renter. We also have vacancy status for this layer, and this is for nation consolidated cities, census designated places, and incorporated places. This is all within the US and Puerto Rico. Within the description, you also get some additional information, such as what vintage it is. So let's see, these are 2020 boundaries. If you want to go into census data.census.gov and find all these individual tables yourself, you can go and find, we have all the tables listed. So if you want to go to this link right here, you can search P1 table and you'll find the associated data for this layer, but we currently have it available, so why not use it? And we did have some additional data processing notes down here if you want to know how we kind of created this specific layer. Next, I'm just going to quickly show some of the attributes that we have. We have a long list of attributes. You can see here, if I just scroll, there's a ton of different attributes. In this case, we have 392 fields just for this layer. But what's nice about this is that we put in field aliases for everything. So if you don't know what the field, let's say maybe P001001 is, most census nerds actually know that's total population, but for most regular users that aren't always in census data, total population is going to be more useful to know. So we put those types of field aliases for every single attribute that we have. We've also put long field descriptions that's shown here. This gives additional information to see what exactly we're being mapped. So if you're not sure exactly, maybe a field might sound a little bit confusing, we have exactly what the census definition is, as well as if we've calculated anything, it'll be noted as Esri calculated field right here, and then the formula as well. So if you want to use that formula to do your own kind of equations and build your own fields, feel free to do so. Now I'm going to go back to the Overview tab and go open this in Map Viewer. If you're not familiar with Map Viewer, it's essentially the ArcGIS Online's mapping component where you can add in your own layers, change the symbology, and do a vast number of things. But I'm going to show just the legend real quick. There we go. And for this example, I'm going to go to where I'm originally from in the Twin Cities. So I'm going to zoom into Minneapolis, St. Paul. And here I see we have a few different layers within this specific layer. So we have consolidated cities, census designated places, as well as incorporated places. Incorporated places, for the most part, are going to be what most cities are referred to. So in this case, if I go to Minneapolis, I can see this incorporated place has a number of different attributes listed within the pop-up, which is a great way to get a lot more context related to each layer. In this case, we see a bar chart showing home ownership by race ethnicity, so you can see how that changes and compares from each of the different races and ethnicities. We also have things such as occupancy status, so owner versus renter, things like household size, so whether it's a single person household or even up to 7 or more. Things you might notice if you compare from city to city, Minneapolis might have a higher single person household, so it's about 40%. But if I go to a different city, such as maybe this city here, like Elmo, that has about only about 16% are single person households, but might notice that the homeownership rate's a lot higher when you go outside of the cities. It's a pretty popular trend within cities. Here in Lake Elmo, it's about 93%, and in Minneapolis, you might see it's about 44%. So it's interesting to see just kind of how different demographics and different data sets vary state or city by city, and as well as other geographies. Looking at the symbology itself, we can see its home ownership rate. Anything in dark purple, such as Minneapolis, indicates a lower home ownership rate. Anything in a dark green, such as the one in Lake Elmo, would indicate a higher home ownership rate. Now, what if you don't want to map home ownership rate? Well, we can go to the layer that we have activated right now, which is incorporated place. Go to the styles options. And then instead of home ownership rate, I can just close out of that. Let's say I'm interested in owner versus renter occupancy status, I can just type in the search bar for search fields, go to owner, if I spell it right. There we go. I see owner occupied housing units. I can click the eye icon to see kind of what exactly this attribute is. And I see that it's the one that I want to use. It's homeownership or owner occupied housing units. So I'll click add. I can also add in, let's see if it actually added. There we go. If I also want renter, I can just go in and search renter and get renter occupied housing units. Map Viewer will tell you which mapping styles it has available based off the attributes that you selected. And so in this case, we get compare A to B, dot density, predominant, etc. I'm going to use predominant because I want to know kind of what's the highest count for each of these for the different cities. And I can change the colors here. Maybe I don't want a red orange. I can go and get maybe a blue red instead. So I'll choose that one. Here I see anything in blue is predominantly going to be renter occupied. Anything in red is predominantly going to be owner occupied. So that's just a quick demo of how to use Map Viewer, going from a layer and just kind of changing the attributes to get a map of interest. You can go in and save the map if you're logged in. You can also create a web application once you create a web map in ArcGIS Online. Now, maybe I don't want layers, maybe I want web maps. We have a number of web maps related to the 2020 census for specifically demographic and housing characteristics. If I wanted to look at the housing layers, but web maps that are being created from that layer, I can just search housing and get a number of different web maps. So things like prevalent housing occupancy in metros or the owner renter vacant status comparison for the kind of nested geographies. So nation, state, county, tract, block group, and block. We also have a number of web applications we've created from kind of all of the different layers and web maps we've used for demographic and housing characteristics. In this case, I'm going to show an example of a housing specific portfolio we created that uses the portfolio instant app. Instant apps are a great way to show kind of presentation ready web maps that are just kind of a more brief and simplified user interface. So if you're showing it to a stakeholder or an executive or something, they don't have to see all the busy work of the actual interface of Map Viewer. They can just get a lot more simplified type of map. Here we're using inset apps within this instant app. So the inset app allows you to have things such as like Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico all in the same scale and extent. So that way you don't have to zoom out all the way to get all the different states. But this way you can get everything using a different projection than the Web Mercator as well. So here we've put just a number of the web maps we've created from Living Atlas. So in this case, we can go from prevalent housing occupancy in US metros. If we want home ownership rates in tribal areas, we can select this one. And these are just a few examples of the different web maps we have that you can pass along if you want to show people just some kind of good examples of how to use specifically housing data from demographic and housing characteristics. And with that, that is it for the live demo portion. I will hand it back over to Diana, and thanks. I'll talk to you guys in a little bit.
All right, thanks, Stephen. So that was a big overview of the demographic and housing characteristics data product from the decennial census. However, there's a lot more available as well. So that's what we'll transition into now. The very first data to come out from decennial census was simply the state apportionment counts, the primary reason we have the census. And so since it was state level, it was very quick to create a layer that's available, as well as a collection of maps that simply show the new seats in Congress and how that compares to 2010 and what have you. So something just very baseline like this is something that can be found in Living Atlas. And like Stephen showed, you can work with the layer itself or all these web maps. Maybe you want to use them in a story map that you're creating or something like that. It's very easy. Like I said, Living Atlas content flows throughout a lot of ArcGIS products and system-wide. All right. We also had self-response rates. I actually presented on this back at GIS Pro in Baltimore 2 years ago. So if you were there, this might be a little familiar to you. During the time when the decennial census was in the field, this was essentially a live feed. It was updating every week with the newest, latest and greatest self-response rates. And obviously now it's the final count of that, but a lot of researchers still like to use that type of measure. It's correlated with all kinds of interesting things, as you might imagine, participation in community programs and so much more. So I do want to caution you a little bit here, though. These are just the self-response rates. So don't be alarmed if you see some low numbers. I do want to point out that Census met and actually exceeded its goal of 60% nationwide of self-response. After the time to self-respond, they had a big non-response follow-up effort where they did actually knock on doors and get the final response rate up to much higher than you'll see here in the self-response rate. Another thing we have related to redistricting with the congressional seats, Census is the building blocks for drawing new seats. And so we had the public law redistricting data available, and we realized that a nationwide block level data set with all the fields needed that can be used for redistricting purposes would be a little overkill for most users. So we broke it into states, as you'll see here. And this has all kinds of it has 18 and over and total pop. So a little bit of an age breakdown, lots of detailed race breakdowns here. And that is yet another thing that's available. So we're continuing on this content tour. Those redistricting layers were then, of course, used to create maps. And so we have all kinds of maps related to those attributes available. Like I said, if you want to use it in a hub site, you want to make a dashboard with it, use it in a story map, that's a great way to use web maps and all kinds of content from Living Atlas. You don't have to build it yourself necessarily. You can use it as a starting place to build these kinds of things. As Stephen mentioned, instant apps are a great way to take a web map and essentially make it into more of an interactive information product for an audience. So here we've got this carousel portfolio experience, as well as an interactive chart viewer experience. Those are just two of many types of instant apps. All right, I want to transition now from the various content and data products that we've done and now transition to ways that we have worked with the fact that Census, you might be familiar with, was essentially protected with an algorithm, we'll call it, called differential privacy. And so what this means is that if you think about when you filled out your census, for me, I would write down, 38-year-old white female renter, and then my husband wrote down his age, race, and Hispanic origin or not. all that, my daughters as well. And so now we've built this household profile that has our exact age, and all kinds of other characteristics about us, race, Hispanic origin, and sex. And you think about how many people on your block would have that exact same household profile as you. I live in a pretty big apartment complex, and I still think I'm probably one of the few, if not the only, that would have that exact same profile for every single member of my household. So Census said, well, data linking has become so sophisticated these days, it would be really easy for some bad actors out there to be able to re-identify a particular household with certainty. So what we're going to do is fuzz it just a little bit, add some noise into the data. This might take the form of fuzzing someone's age slightly or moving a household across a block or something. They have published an entire handbook as to all the statistics behind it. But the challenge for us was that this data has some noise to it. So let's think about ways where we can deal with that. The first thing that people wanted to know was how much noise is in this data. So Esri's data development team came up with a way where they have approximated the noise in all these census estimates and has presented it in a way that's very similar to margins of error from American Community Survey. So that's ACS MOEs, you can think of it, they're presenting it as a range. This is, again, Esri's best guess as to what Census has done to inject noise into the data. It's available for anyone to find in Living Atlas. We've got the app, we've got a blog that explains it a little bit more. And I know it's been a great resource for some people. But the challenge on our team was to think about how are we going to use things like pop-ups, labels, and of course symbology, and maybe other techniques as well to communicate this concept. And so we have a number of blogs here. They're available at esriurl.com/censusblogs, as well as this hub site, which has more differential privacy resources for you. But these blogs go over some cool techniques that we have developed, but we're always interested in learning from others and seeing what others do as well. So here I am with those redistricting block groups. I'll open this one up. And Census has said loud and clear that yes, it's going to be fuzzy at the smaller geography level, but as you aggregate up and as you're forming these new congressional districts, it's going to get a lot more accurate. So I know a whole bunch of us were just at in Columbus, Ohio. I was there and I got to meet a whole bunch of you. That was really nice. Zooming in so that the block groups turn on. What it's going to do in the pop-up is it's aggregating up with all the adjacent tracks. So we see here the count was 703, but all these characteristics that are in that redistricting file, I'm going to get a more accurate sense of those if I aggregate it up with, in this case, the adjacent block groups around. So I'm going to calculate all these percentages on the fly. Let's try another one up here. Again, it's going to aggregate it very quickly, and we'll see that these percentages are not the ones that are associated with just that block group. That's a field in the layer itself, but the pop-up is what's going to do that arcade calculation on the fly and present a more accurate characteristics profile here of that block group. And so we have the arcade behind it available. in the web map. You're always welcome to drill into our web maps and see the arcade behind things, but we also publish it in a blog. It's basically recalculating an aggregated percent of those greater than or equal to age 18. Pretty easy. So that's the pop-up. We also thought for a while about how to do this with symbology to show that there's been this fuzziness, this noise interjected into the data. And there's something called layer effects. And one that stuck out to me was one called blur. And you can see, the top image does not have the blur. The second image definitely does. You can see it in the legend. It was actually developed for like physical geography and wildlife habitats and things that are not precisely defined as like census blocks and census tracts. But I thought, hey, this is a great use case for it with data that has had this differential privacy added to it. So I just want to point out that it's the layer that is blurred with the layer effect. It does not make a blurry map overall because we can still see the base map, the streets, the labels. Those are all still sharp and clear. It's just blurring whatever layer you're putting this effect on. So this kind of communicates that, yeah, this data is a little fuzzy, but as you zoom out, the blur goes down and down. So we're getting that more accurate picture, the more we're aggregating up as Census has recommended, and as most GIS practices and analyses would do anyway. So we do have a hub site with all kinds of differential privacy resources for GIS analysts. One is just an overall story map about more information as to what exactly this is. We have that app that I mentioned where Esri has approximated what the noise is, and some of the blogs like the two that I showed earlier. With that, I'm going to stop sharing and let Stephen change to other census data sets, non-decennial.
Thanks, Diana. All right, yes, Diana mentioned these will be census products that aren't the decennial census products, but they are from the Census Bureau. The first one I'll be briefly touching on is the American Community Survey, or ACS for short. Our team manages the current 5-year estimates. So these are our rolling estimates. The current years is 2017 to 2021, but we do update it every December when it is released. I just want to say a quick story. Before I started at Esri, one of my jobs was essentially doing this by myself at a nonprofit, pulling all the data back when it was American Fact Finder and having to make the maps myself. And I thought, it'd be great if like this was always updated and I could just pull the maps and add my own local data to it. And then I think in 2018, this team started doing it. So just some background on how it's useful. But we also have a historical year to compare it to. The historical 5-year rolling estimate that we are using is the 2010 to 2014 year. For American Community Survey, we have 108 layers in Living Atlas. We have both boundaries and centroids, so think census tracts and counties, etc. But we also have the centroids of those. So if you wanted, you can do some different types of mapping depending on which type of geography you use. And this is a select kind of curated number of layers. We could theoretically do every single ACS table possible, but we really picked the ones that were kind of the most requested, as well as kind of what we saw as the most used as well. These are just 8 examples of what we have. So a population one that kind of just goes over kind of high level population. one that's specifically on race and Hispanic origin, things such as poverty status, as well as kind of the poverty ratio. So whether you're under 150%, under 200% federal poverty line, et cetera. Medium household income. So we have a lot of different income variables within ACS that we have in Living Atlas. Educational attainment. So things like whether you have a bachelor's degree or high school education, et cetera. Health insurance variables. This one's really great to compare with the 2010-2014 data set. You can see a pretty significant change throughout the last decade or so. Things such as labor force by participation, we have by age and by sex, I believe, and a few of the different layers we have by kind of a cross tabulation of by age, by sex, by race, etc. One of the newer ones we had the past couple of years is internet connectivity. I believe this started to be a census table maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So it's one of our newer ones that we have. Just one thing to note about this, we do have all the margins of error associated with these. And for Esri calculated fields, we also have the margins of errors for the percentages as well. So if you want to see kind of how reliable the data is, you can use the margins of error as a way to see how reliable all the estimates are. Next thing I want to show is a census tract comparison app that our colleague Lisa Berry created. Just uses a simple swipe app to show changes in geography boundaries from 2019 census tracts to the 2020 census tracts. The 2019s are the ones on the left side that are shown in kind of that dark pink, and the ones on the right are blue, showing the 2021s. If you swipe to the left, you should see the 2021s. You might see some that are combined, so they're going from multiple census tracts to one census tract. That's usually if they've gone from, usually if there's less population, they'll kind of group things together. And the opposite side, if you see a larger census tract in 2020 or 2019 going from a multiple or split essentially in 2020, essentially is saying in most cases that the census tracts have probably gone up in population, so they've split the boundaries up there. Not always the case, but from what we've seen, generally it is one of the cases. We also have a layer as well as a few maps and web applications on the sexual orientation and gender identity topic. We have this from the Household Pulse Survey. This is specifically from the first week that this survey was asked for this specific topic, which was week 34. So that was July 21st to August 2nd, 2021. If you see in the pop-up on the right side, we have this by states. So all states, as well as the top largest 15 metros. We have things such as breakdowns by gender identity, so transgender, cisgender, and those that haven't listed. We have the percentages listed there, as well as sexual orientation with the breakdowns here as well. The Household Pulse Survey essentially looks at kind of, it's a survey that kind of looks through and sees how things are changing. So it's very relevant and current. And yeah, so the next one I have is the Citizen Voting Age Population, or CVAP for short. This looks at voting age eligibility. So those that are 18 years or older, as well as that have the right citizen, so naturalized or citizen as well. This data set's great for if you want to find out like voting age turnout or voting turnout rather, you could use this as the denominator. And we have 3 layers here. One is kind of the standard census geography. So it's nation, state, county, tract, and block group. We also have one that looks specifically at congressional and other legislative districts, such as the upper and lower chambers. And lastly, if you want to look at cities, we have one that's specifically on places and minor civil divisions. If you look at the left image here, we see kind of the breakdowns we have by race and ethnicity. So by non-Hispanic or Latino, you get kind of the race breakdowns here. So Asian alone, Black or African American alone, et cetera, as well as the margins of error on the right side and the estimate on the left side. We also get, I believe, the top 5 largest multiracial multiracial groups or two or more races. So things like Black or African American and white, Asian and white, etc. One thing to note is that this data set does round up to the nearest 5 or 10th value. So that's something a little bit different from ACS that you might notice. All of the different census products that I've just shown here, you can find at this URL. It's esriurl.com/popblogs. If you go to this link, you can essentially click any of these different blogs that we have, and it'll go directly to those web pages, so you can get a little bit more information about each of those specific census topics. So I'm going to stop a little bit there. If you want to take a screenshot, again, it's esriurl.com/popblogs, and I can also copy that and put it in the chat as well. All right, 10:48. We have, I think, 12 minutes left for Q&A, and I'll pass it back to you all. Thanks.
Stephen, this is Glenn. I just thought I'd interject. I saw you mentioned about having a map with internet availability from the census, but have you guys been following what the FCC is doing with their data, with broadband data collection?
Yeah, we do actually have FCC broadband data. I can put that in the chat real quick.
Because that is more granular.
Right. Yeah, that does get down to like census block. Let me see if I can grab it real quick. Let me reshare my screen.
Yeah, and it also has a lot richer attribution in terms of like the upload, download speeds and things too.
Yeah, so if you search FCC or broadband as well in Living Atlas, you can get the different feature layers that we have, as well as a few web maps and web applications. I'll just go to this one, for example, just to show what FCC has. I think we update this every year as well. And so I can just zoom into where I'm living in Pasadena. So I got Pasadena here. And we can see areas are in green have a higher or faster speed, so a higher broadband score. Areas in dark purple or dark pink rather would have lower speed. So if we click on any of the pop-ups, and currently we're looking at blocks, so I should get some additional information as well, such as the specific speeds that it has.
Yeah, because governments can use these maps to challenge, because the data is provided by the service providers.
Exactly.
And, the old maps would use blocks which, in especially rural areas, are very large. So any one site that had broadband made the whole block say that broadband was available to it. And the Congress passed legislation to require a lot greater granularity in identifying service available.
Exactly. So, yeah. This is one layer that we've heard from our users in state and local government that have used it to be able to kind of make the argument that the FCC data is not sufficient enough to for certain criterias. So I know there's other data sets. I think UCLA speed test data is out. That might also be in Living Atlas. I can just quickly search. So we have some additional broadband type data as well in Living Atlas.
Cool. So Dan Miller asks, is there homeless numbers available through the census?
Yes, let me show you what we've got. So in that group quarters layer, it was only homeless in shelters. So, people experiencing homelessness who are in emergency or transitional shelters with sleeping facilities. So, the map that we made, I wanted to make explicitly clear that, yeah, this does not count everybody. A lot of people are living out of their cars, definitely large unhoused populations. but this was one of the few pretty granular counts of people experiencing homelessness in any kind of census count. And in fact, I looked pretty detailed, or I looked at the pretty detailed information as to what exactly these shelters were that they were counting as group quarters facilities. And there were three major types. First come, first serve, where people must leave and they have no guaranteed bed for the next night, was the first type. Shelters where it was a little bit longer period of time, but they're allowed to leave during the day. And then shelters for extreme weather. And if people, you know, during extreme cold weather, there are a little bit more of these shelters that pop up to help those who are unhoused. This was, yeah, like I said, a very small subset of the real homeless population. So it's those who are in shelters only, and those three types, just based on that decennial count. So it was a snapshot in time. It's not updated all the time like the American Community Survey would be. Let me zoom out just a hair so you see the full pop-up. But you know, the nice thing is we did get age and sex breakdowns for this. So that is something that might help. And I was struck by, not in this tract, but in many tracts, the number of children was quite high. Let me stop sharing.
I know here in California, at least some of the cities actually annually do go out and count people on the street, kind of thing.
Yes.
I don't know if that gets
Yes.
aggregated anywhere. I know it's not census.
It's HUD. Yeah, it gets aggregated up to these continuum of care areas that are very, very large, actually, and they're essentially for HUD programming. Mm-hmm. Yes, you're totally right.
Okay, 5 minutes left. Are there any other questions? Okay. Oh. No. So hearing no other questions, well, I want to thank Diana and Stephen for a great presentation, a lot of information, great things that Esri's doing, you know, to make all of this available and in a very usable form. It's I know there's a new DCH-A data release.
Yes.
Do you know when
Great question.
You're going to incorporate that?
We actually are interested in learning from potential users what they would be interested in, because that one is so big and so challenging. So we're kind of in the evaluation phase right now. So actually that's a great question. If anyone out there is interested in Living Atlas having that detailed DHCA data product, we want to talk to you, because we want to understand how to make the best layer for your needs.
And how would people provide that input?
Well, feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you my email address here. It's dlavery@esri.com, and I will schedule an interview with you and my team, and we'll learn all about your needs. And yeah, Stephen's got his as well, as Aviles at esri.com. And we're, yeah, like I said, still in the evaluation phase for that data product, but great question. Mm-hmm.
I appreciate it. And so any other questions? I want to thank everybody in attendance. Wendy Nelson, our URISA Executive Director, do you want to make any comments ending comments, if you will?
No, I just want to thank you all for this great presentation. It was very engaging, and I think we'll see some follow-ups on this for sure. So thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Thank
And
you.
again, thank you, Diana and Stephen. It was a great presentation. I really appreciate it. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us. Mhm.
Yeah.
Bye.